And now I'm ready to start my color grading process. And it all starts with Camera Raw. So I'm going to go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And I'm going to build upon what Jordan has already provided for me. And it all starts with clarity. The first thing I want to work with here is clarity. And you can go very wrong with clarity. Too much clarity just looks bad. Super contrasted and she just looks over-processed. On the flip side, too little clarity looks like she's living in glow here. So we don't want that. But we do want a little bit of edge, so we're going to bring this clarity up to about 20. And that's a nice balance. It's going to give a little punch to the image, which is exactly what we need in this nice direct sunlight. The next adjustment I'm going to make is to mute the color. And I'm going to do that with the vibrance scale. And I use the vibrance scale over the saturation scale is because it's a little bit more subtle. As you can see with the saturation scale, it completely removes the color when I drag this at -100. But with the vibrance scale, when I scale this all the way down to -100, there's still a hint of color. I'm going to bring this vibrance scale to about -30. That's about all the first adjustments I make in Camera Raw. I'm going to hit OK, and now we're going to move into color contrast. But before we look at color contrast, we need to analyze the image. We need to study this image and really think about the direction of where we're going to go. Do I want to go warm? Do I want to go cool? This image has nice direct sunlight, so I think it really calls for warm tones. And so that's what we're going to do now. And in order to do that, we first have to add color contrast, and we add color contrast with curves. So I need to go up to the Curves adjustment layer, click that. You're going to notice this graph pops up in your Properties palette. We're going to select the RGB drop-down menu and select the red channel. One thing to remember is that there's a lot of red in warm tones. We need to add a little bit of red. And in order to do that, we need to select the center point of this red channel and then push this towards the top left corner. And this is going to add a little bit of red to the entire image. You want to be careful not to do too much because your image is going to go completely red, and then if you were to take out, your image would go completely blue. So we need to add a little bit of red and do it very subtly. Next up, we're going to go to the green channel. The goal with the green channel is that we want to add magenta to the shadows and add green to the highlights. So all we need to do is select the bottom side of this channel and drag the greens towards the bottom right corner, and then select the line at the top right corner and bring that to the top left corner, which is going to add a significant amount of green to the highlights. And as you can see, it forms a small S curve. Next up, we're going to go to the blue channel, and we're going to repeat the process. We're just going to form that small, subtle S curve. This is going to add a little bit of red to the shadows and a little bit of blue to the highlights. Now that we've added our contrast to this image, we need to balance this out a little bit and really add in some midtones. So we select the Color Balance Adjustment layer. This is where we can get really creative with color grading. We could go extremely yellow, extremely magenta, extremely cyan, or vice versa. But in this case, we want to balance all these colors out and still maintain some natural realism. So what I want to do is start with the yellow and blue slider. So I want to drag this to the left to add a significant amount of warmth to the image. Next, I want to play with this magenta and green slider. I need to add a little bit of green to the midtones just to balance out this magenta. So I'm going to bring this up to 10 and add a little bit more green. Next, I'm going to alter this cyan and red slider. I need to take away the reds just a hair, add a little bit more cyans, so I'm going to drag this to -10, and it's going to cool off those hot reds. I've really liked what this has done to her skin and her coat. It's added a nice warmth to the entire shot, but I still want a little bit of green added to this sky. I'm going to select the Hue Saturation Adjustment layer. Then click on this selector tool, which is an eyedropper, which is going to allow me to control a specific color in the sky. So I'm just going to click a general area here of blue. As you can see in my hue saturation palette, only the blues are selected now. From here, what we need to do is change this hue slider to a little bit more green. And you just want to play in this tone. Remember, this is a completely creative process, so you can go as far as you want or as little as you want. For me, I like a really nice balance between the two. So I don't want too green and I don't want too blue. So about right there looks pretty good. So keep in mind that if there's any other blue colors in the entire image, this would also affect that as well. So if her jeans are blue or if she was wearing a blue dress or a coat, that would also be affected. Since she's not wearing anything that matches the color of the sky, we don't have to worry about that. Next up, we're going to go to the saturation slider, and just to saturate that sky just a bit, I'm going to bring this to -10. Now we're going to go to the lightness and really bring out some of this highlight and take out some of the lightness of this sky. We're going to also drag that to -10. I think we have the color where we want it. We've got a nice color on her skin and on the coat and in the sky. It's really warm. It gives a really organic feeling to the entire shot. So now we're going to move on to the final step, which is sharpening. And I have a really unique style for sharpening. I actually sharpen with surface blur. And it's a few steps, so I want you to follow along very closely because it can get very complicated. The first step, what we need to do, is stamp all these layers back down to a single layer. So we need to highlight all the layers holding down Shift and selecting all the layers at once. Then I need to stamp all these layers down to one layer using Control-Alt-Shift-E or Command-Option-Shift-E. Then I need to duplicate this layer using Control-J or Command-J. Once we have that layer duplicated, we're going to put both of these layers into one single group. In order to do that, you need to select both layers by holding down Shift, then hitting Control-G or Command-G. Another way you could have done this is to create a group from this icon right down here and drag both of the layers into that. Once you have your group formed, the next step is to drop down the Blending Modes tab here and select Overlay. Don't worry, your image is going to look crazy for a little bit, but just trust me. Drop down your group layer, and then what you want to do is hit Control-I or Command-I to invert that first layer in the group. The next step is now you want to change your first layer in the group to Vivid Light. And now it should return back to normal, but we're not done yet. The next step is to apply Surface Blur. So you need to go to Filter, Blur, Surface Blur, and make sure you have this top layer selected. You want to keep the radius about 10 and the threshold around 8. If you're to go further than this, your image is going to come out overly sharpened. So you need to keep a nice balance between 10 radius and the threshold at 8. From there, you select OK, and you're going to wait for a second. Our image is completely sharpened, and you can see there's a lot of detail that's been added in her face. And if we're to click this group on and off, you're going to see a major difference. With this technique, your image might look a little too sharpened. So one simple way to reduce the sharpening is to lower the opacity. And in this case, I'm going to lower it to 50%. I like the sharpness of this image. This is exactly where I want to be. But there's one final step, and that is to add noise to the image. And the reason why I add noise is that it gives a really raw, organic film look to your final image. This is a creative choice. This is something I like doing. You don't necessarily have to do it on your images. To add a little bit more noise, we need to repeat that stamp layer process by hitting Control-Alt-Shift-E or Command-Option-Shift-E. Now that we have our base layer built here, we're going to go up to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. We're going to select Gaussian. Make sure that the noise is monochromatic. We do not want color in our noise. I keep the amount to around 2% because once you go past that, it can get overly noisy. Once you have your noise applied, hit OK. And I think we have a final image here. In order to maintain an organized layer palette, if I were to ever open this image again, I need to make sure I name these layers. So the first layer I want to rename is this curves layer. And I'm going to call that color contrast. The second layer, I'm going to name that color. It's just color. The third layer, we're mostly working with the sky, so I can change that to the sky. Then the group layer, that's always going to be sharpening. And the final layer is noise. As I'm finishing this image up, I'm noticing this small vignette around the top right and left corners of the image. So a quick way to reduce that or to eliminate that is to crop it out. So our last step here is I'm going to hold down the crop button, hold down shift so we maintain the aspect ratio, and then just bring this down a little bit, hit enter, and our image is cropped to where it needs to be. If we hold down Alt and then click this eye on the background layer, we can see all the adjustments in a before and after perspective. Now that I have this image exactly where I want it, the color looks nice, the noise and sharpening are applied, and we've added a final crop to it, I'm going to export this and move on to the next shot.